We've had a number of talks yesterday where the speakers have said that 30 to 50% of food is lost or wasted. Where is the evidence? Because people are using the FAO report to 2011. Like anything published, we need to have a look at the methods. But when you have a look at the methods, they're not very good. We need to be careful not to believe our own propaganda about food losses and waste. I'm not saying that food losses and waste are small, but we need to be careful about when they occur and on what product they occur. One, most of the data is from the developed world, and two, most of the data is not very good. This is really the pattern of food losses and waste in the developed world, where most of it tends to happen. Consumption. The reverse tends to be seen in the developing world. But actually, you can't really divide the world into the developing world and the developed world, because even in the developing world, you have a middle class, a growing middle class. So, for example, the middle class in Brazil is about the same size as the UK. One of the things that concerns me most is the robustness of the methodology that is used by most of our post-harvest community. The robustness of the methodology to measure and assess food losses and waste is very questionable. I would urge you, when you look at the FAO report in 2011 on food waste, if you look at some of the data that comes out of that, so we throw away 4 million apples every day. So the first question that I ask myself, how did you arrive on that figure? And that should be the first question that you should ask, not, oh, that's really bad. And then we look at some of the figures that companies like Tesco have produced. Okay? So this is data that they released in October 2013. How did they arrive at that data? And when you look at the way that they have measured, this is not just Tesco, but across the board, the methodology that they've used to assess and measure food loss and waste, it is not good enough. It doesn't account for the temporal changes, spatial changes, differences in genetics, differences in cultivar. If you look at these figures here, this is data from the UK between 2003 and 2011. And this is for apples. You just look at the total amount of apples that are sold. It's not flat. So the demand for apples changes depending on the space. The other thing is you can see that the pattern is very much similar every year. If you look at what you personally buy, you probably buy most of the same things every week. Okay? So one of the things that I'm trying to put forward here is hardly any of this data accounts for this. And this is critical because we might find that the level of waste changes during the year. And it probably does. What we've got to be careful of is that when we talk about 30 to 50% of post-harvest losses, it's a good figure, but where's the evidence? Wasting food doesn't make social sense, it doesn't make environmental sense, and it doesn't make economic sense. So why does it still happen? We tried to look at the causes and the volume of waste for 11 produce types. What we tried to do is we looked at the level of field loss, grading loss, storage loss, packing loss, and retail loss. So this is in the UK, where supply chain management is actually usually very good. The cool chain is usually very good. These levels of waste are actually quite low at retail. They're actually relatively low to the 30%, but they're actually still quite high. So 4%. I'm actually trying to say this stuff's being wasted. And it depends on some of the products. So for example, the grading loss, okay, for some products is quite high. So for apples, the grading loss in some varieties can be 5 to 25%. Now that's not waste, that's loss, because those apples can still be used for other things. And again, we need to be careful that we understand the difference between losses and waste. When we look at the levels of food loss and waste, and most of the data that is provided, it talks about the specific loss for apples or specific loss for potatoes. One of the issues with that is there are lots of different varieties, and each variety will be either more robust or will be able to store better than others. And what we've tended to see in the last 3 or 4 decades, perhaps more, is that there's been a trade-off between post-harvest storage and flavour and taste. It's not just flavour and taste, it's also those health promoting properties. Essentially what we have done with apples, and I think this is the case with many fruit products, we have increased the sugar concentration, and we've reduced the health promoting properties, and we've extended inherent post-harvest life. And I would argue that for many products this is not what we should be doing. So we found that some of the older apple varieties had as much as 20 to 30% higher concentrations of specific bioactives than some modern apple. Now, with the advent of gene editing, we may be able to select some of those traits and actually get the best of both worlds. So again, this has a profound effect on food losses and waste. The variety has a profound effect. And I think what we have tended to do is mask or rather than invest in post-harvest technology for less robust fruit that have a better flavour and taste profile, we have effectively commoditized fruits. So if you look at bananas, it's all Cavendish. If you look at avocados, 95% of the avocados sold in the UK are one cultivar. Funding for food losses and waste should be increased. There is too much research that is done showing us that food losses and waste is an issue. We know it's an issue. We know that a lot of the data is flawed, but in many ways it's more important to actually find solutions than just keep the data and telling us how bad the problem is. We need to come up with solutions in order to do that. And that means that we don't work in isolation as biologists. We need to work with engineers, supply chain management colleagues, and technologists. Because if we just work in isolation, then no wonder why some of the solutions that we create don't work in the real world. If you look at the number of post-harvest principal investigators worldwide, you're probably only talking a community of 500 or 600 people. That simply is not enough human capital to deliver on Sustainable Development Goal 12.3, which is to reduce food loss and waste by 50% by 2030. And it just isn't going to happen. So someone's going to wake up and actually start funding this stuff, because otherwise we just won't change the status quo. So thank you. Quite happy to answer any questions.